Greetings. My name is Jalandra A. Davis, otherwise known as Mommy Melusine. I am a writer, scholar, educator, dancer, mermaid enthusiast, and all around creative. Welcome to the Merwomanist podcast, where we talk about Black mermaid lore, fantasy, spirituality, and aquatic culture. Dive in and enjoy. Hello, greetings, and welcome back to the Merwomanist podcast with Mommy Melusine. And I am here with a wrap up of some of my recent reading for my horror month on my podcast, as well as Blackoween. So I'll be talking about some of the horror reads that I have finished so far this month and also what categories they fit for the Blackoween readathon. So if you didn't, please go back and listen to my Blackoween episode where I explain a little bit about the Blackoween readathon, which is started by Loc'D Booktician, who is a book reviewer and booktuber who I follow. So in the show notes of that episode, I also have a link to her video where she really breaks it all down. She is the creator of this readathon, and I am just using this to read along and to just try to make sure I'm moving forward my fiction reading list. And this month I'm focusing on Black horror. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to read along with this readathon. Feeling pretty happy with myself with how many books I've actually finished, which I'm not even talking about all of them today on the podcast. So I'm just going to jump right in because I'm talking about several books and I will try to keep my thoughts pretty quick and also go through what prompts they fit for the Blackoween readathon. So if you didn't hear my former episode, Loc'D Booktician created something called Tulish Parish, and it is a map. And you pick different levels that you are going to participate on that map, which determines how many books you read that are associated with the theme of each location. So I'm just going to be pointing out some of the books that I read and talking about the area of the map that they correspond to. And again, if you want to know more about the rules of the readathon, please watch Locked Booktician's breakdown because I'm not going to go through all of it. Okay, and let me just name all the books I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Jessica Cage's The Siren's Test. Siren's Call, I read several months ago. Siren's Test is the one I read this month for the readathon. Monica Brashears' House of Cotton. Sarah Daas, It Waits in the Forest. Donyae Cole's Midnight Rooms. And Tylenol Review's The Reformatory. And I'm talking about these books in the order of how much I enjoyed them. Because if you've been listening to the podcast lately, I'm taking the gloves off. I am being honest about my thoughts and feelings about the books that I read. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Siren's Test by Jessica Cage. This is part of the Siren series by Jessica Cage, a Black writer. And this is probably the only one of the books I'm talking about today that is a mermaid's book. The main character is a Black siren, and most of the characters are Black magical creatures. This is by Jessica Cage. I believe she was a journalist before she started writing fiction. I don't know too much about her. I do know that it's the indie series. I'm pretty sure it's self-published, but fairly good distribution because I actually picked this up in a bookstore. I picked this up in Malik's Books, which is a Black bookstore. So for an indie book, I think she's getting pretty good distribution. This is actually the first book in the series. The one that I read for the readathon is Siren's Test, which is the second book, but I can't seem to find it. I finished it when I was out on the beach in Santa Cruz because I was out of town for a conference, and I'm hoping I didn't leave my book on the beach. But this will give you an idea of what the cover looks like. It's like the exact same thing, except with two sexy Black mermen on either side of her. So I kind of hate that I can't show you that because they're pretty sexy. So this is the paranormal erotica or romance. I feel like the line's very blurry these days, right? So, like a spicy paranormal series about a siren named Sirenata. I believe that's how you pronounce it. She does not find out she's a siren until she is an adult when she is attacked by a group of men. And the scene is kind of triggering, but the author does put a trigger warning for that scene, and you can't read the book without reading that scene. But she gets sort of her siren powers activated by a violent experience. and realizes that not only can she like exert control over people and seduce men like they're helpless to her, but she also kind of has succubus powers. She can drain them dry of their life force, and she actually needs to. She actually needs to feed on their life force from time to time once her siren power gets activated. This is in addition to her also being able to take mermaid form underwater, breathe underwater, all of that. So she's a very powerful being. She finds out that the reason she is so powerful, is it spoiler? Well, I don't think so. The reason she is so powerful is she's the daughter of both a siren and a warlock. So a warlock is a male witch. Witches and sirens have been at war in her world. And sirens at one point were banished and punished for taking advantage of killing men, such as she does at the beginning of the book. And so, as a child who represents both lines, she is feared for her power and she's pursued by people. So, the first book is all about her kind of finding out about all this and meeting these brothers from another siren, male siren family that is charged with protecting her. And of course, those both those brothers fall in love with her. So we get this love triangle with many erotic scenes of her with both brothers. So not both at the same time. We get a little bit of that in the second book, but either one, right? So lots of getting with one, getting interrupted by the other one, them fighting over her. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. First book's a lot of fun. So the second book, the one that I read for the readathon, follows Sirenata as she goes to pursue her siren stone, which is a jewel or stone that will give her the power to protect herself from all of the different forces and beings that are pursuing her because her existence is considered to be like an abomination. So, I said I was gonna be honest. I said I was gonna be honest, but also I have a lot more grace with indie books because just as indie books are people are able to publish independently, like I published my first novel independently. My first novel is up here somewhere. Oh, Butterfly Jar by Jalandra Davis. This my first novel, my only novel, right? But I self-published this book. So I don't have anything against self-publishing. It can be a great way for writers, particularly marginalized writers, to get around the gatekeeping of the industry, a gatekeeping that often keeps certain kinds of work that isn't following the dominant trends from being produced, right? Which is something maybe I'll talk about more on the podcast. So I'm all for self publishing, but sometimes as we invade the gatekeeping, we also invade some of the quality control that can come from having like an editorial team, right? And so this series, there's just a lot of craft problems, a lot of craft problems. And I think a lot of people might not mind that. But for me, it's just very hard when I'm seeing PLV problems. I'm seeing things that don't seem to be fully thought through, fully described, scenes being very rushed, things like a lot of exclamation points at the end of sentences, which just really isn't necessary in fiction, dialogue not being structured correctly, that kind of stuff. It gets to me. It kind of gets to me. One of the things I always tell my students when I do have the opportunity to teach creative writing is that your goal when you're writing fiction is to bring people completely into the world, completely into the body of the character. You don't want people to feel like I'm reading a book. You want them to feel like they are there. And so every time you do stuff like make these like little errors or mistakes, it reminds us that the author is there, it takes us out of the world. At least that's the way I feel, right? Even with the problems, I had fun with the first book. The second book, Siren's Test, I didn't enjoy as much. I think the over arc of the story and her having to go through these tests and the nature of the test and the way she passes it, I think all of that was pretty good. I just thought it could have been executed with like more detail and more carefulness. There's one point where two characters are like running away, and while they're running away they're having a full-fledged conversation, and I'm like, you wouldn't be able to have this kind of conversation while you're running for your lives with like a panther behind you. Like that kind of stuff kind of takes me out of it. It makes it harder to get invested. But story wise, I saw what it was doing. It was fun. It introduces a third love interest, which I thought was kind of curious because I felt like there was a lot more story that could have been told with the love triangle from the first book, and this love interest isn't really very rich. The relationship isn't very rich, so I'm like, why a third one? I don't know. And it wasn't as spicy as the first one. That was one thing I did enjoy about the first one. It was really spicy. Now, there is a moment in Siren's test where there is a male, male, female threesome, which I'm here for it. I'm so here for it. I thought that scene was great. And then it gets interrupted by a character who's like, this is wrong. And I'm like, what? It's like it's a erotic series, but there still seem to be these boundaries around how far it can go. And it still ends up being extremely like monogamous, heteronormative. And I just feel like with these supernatural beings, you don't have to follow the rules of a heteronormative monogamous world in the real world, right? Lots of people don't, and especially in fantasy. And then two of the brothers who are in love with her are also part demon. I just feel like we could have did something more exciting. I don't know, I'm just sounding like a freak right now, but I'm just like, if we're going to do erotica, if we're going to do paranormal erotica, I just feel like lean in. What kind of special attributes might these demons have with this mermaid? And then we've got threesomes. I just feel like if you're gonna do it, do it. I feel like it could have gone further. So out of all the books I've read, it's not my favorite on the list, but I do think that they're fun books to check out the series, this Black Mermaid series. And it's a Black Mermaid series that has nuts. So if you're looking for something that really doesn't have anything to do with real history, you just got this hot, beautiful mermaid with all these powers and all these sexy mermen and witches and wizards in love with her, like this is it, right? Pick it up. Oh, I forgot to talk about the prompts. So I would say it's not really horror. The first one feels a lot more horror than the second one, actually, when she's really leaning into her succubus thing. But I would say that these books would fit best into SheShe's kitchen, and the prompt SheShe's kitchen that they fit is Spicy Paranormal by Black women. Okay, so that would be my recommendation for a spicy paranormal by a Black woman would be something from Jessica Cage's Siren series, but do be prepared to give some grace around some of the craft in the book. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is Monica Brashears' House of Cotton. This is a fairly recent release, I think a couple of years. It is a Southern Gothic novel. How do I define Gothic? I sometimes I think people just use Gothic as a synonym for horror. I don't think that's quite it. I think Gothic to me is a lot about atmosphere, like a heavy, tense type of atmosphere. It often involves a young woman, which I think there's a little subversion of that in the book I'm going to talk about later, but it often involves a young woman who is put into peril in a particular kind of environment. I would say the history of the Gothic novel really comes, it's closely associated with the Gothic architecture, which was the setting for a lot of the early Gothic novels from the Enlightenment period through the Victorian era. Those old big estates, churches, castles, those kind of Gothic structures of medieval and modern Europe. So Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a Gothic novel. Wuthering Heights, right? The Bronte sisters novels, Jane Eyre, right? So those are the ones we I think of when we think of historical Gothic, but there's also contemporary Gothic. And so how I would define contemporary Gothic is heavily atmospheric horror or horror adjacent novels that are closely connected to place, that have a constant environment of fear, tension, death, where death feels ever present or feels ever near, terror, right? And a fear or a possibility of the supernatural, though Gothic novels are not do not always have explicitly supernatural elements. I also think there's often an occurrence of, if it's not supernatural, there's often madness, characters going mad or I guess we would call that mental illness, right? In contemporary words. But so death or madness, these are things that constantly hang over the text. They're texts where the past constantly hangs over the text, whether it's in the physical location or the sort of twisted histories of the family or the set of characters who are at the center of the novel. So there's often like twisted, complex, dark family histories in Gothic novels as well. Right. So that's how I would describe the Gothic. And so I don't think that only those old European novels are not the only Gothic novels, but that's kind of where the concept comes from, and that's what shapes a lot of the features of the genre. Okay, so now that we know what a Gothic novel is, Monica Brashears is a contemporary Southern Gothic novel about a young woman named Magnolia, poor, working class, young, light skinned, mixed. Oh, yeah, her mother is white. So she's literally a biracial Black young woman, and she's raised by her grandmother because her mother is substance addicted. Her father's not in the picture, or is he dead? I don't quite remember. She's raised by her paternal grandmother. So her grandmother, her father's mother, raises her. And towards the beginning of the novel, her grandmother dies and she's just kind of left alone in the world and she's trying to figure it out. She's working at a gas station. She's trying to hold on to her grandmother's house. She has a creepy predator of a landlord. I think that's another characteristic of the Gothic novel is you often have young women and there's often a threat of like sexual like violation or sexual harassment or predation. I feel like that's also something you often see in the Gothic novel. And she's just trying to make it, right? She's trying to make it. She also has this thing she does, and the book doesn't ever kind of explain to us why she does this. I don't know if it's about human connection, but she just likes to sleep, like hook up with and sleep with random men, right? So there's a lot of scenes as well that would be spicy if they didn't feel so grim and depressing. Right. But like it's not hot. It just doesn't feel hot because there's something driving this behavior that's not really her own autonomy and pursuit of pleasure. So what makes it really gothic is that she goes to work for a white funeral home director who wants her to for this new service that he's offering to people, he wants her to pose as the dead relatives. He wants her to pose as the dead person who has passed on to these relatives who are having some need to connect with family members they lost. And so these aren't people who the person had a long life natural death. These are people who disappeared or had a violent death or murdered and no one really knows what happens. Like these are the kind of people that are patronizing this service. And so she gets dressed up in makeup and is able to like become these different people and talk to their relatives representing the dead person. And clearly this guy is really obsessed with death. There's a lot of insinuation of I forget what it's called. There's like a disorder where people like to have sex with dead people. Um, I don't remember exactly what that's called, but he's got some stuff going on. Yeah, so she just gets pulled into this whole thing and she's just trying to survive. She's just trying to survive it, right? This book is beautifully written. I mean, the writing is so beautiful. And the writing is very edgy. It's a very courageous book. One of the reasons I feel this is gothic, because some other things that are associated with the gothic are like death, decay, rot, right? Just it's about places that are rotten, right? And that rottenness sort of pervading the whole atmosphere of the characters' lives and the protagonist trying to figure out what is the root of the rot and how do I get out of it, right? So all of that atmospheric stuff and the daringness of the writing, its willingness to go there, its willingness to give us really intense sensory detail about really unsavory things. Magnolia is haunted, and sometimes you're not sure if she's literally haunted or if she's imagining it, but she is haunted by the ghost of her grandmother who's like rotting and falling apart. She is haunted also by the baby she aborted, which, as someone who's solidly pro choice, I had a little bit of issue with the baby she aborted being represented like as a baby that like requires her care, but I'm not gonna talk too much about that because I only have so much time to film this episode. It went there. The book was not afraid to go there, and the writing was beautiful. Monica Brashears can definitely write. The story, though, for me, just didn't work. It felt like for too much of the book, it just felt like it wasn't going anywhere. I don't have a cover for this book because I actually listened to this on Audible. So maybe I would have done better with a hard copy of it because my attention tends to wander sometimes when I'm listening to a book. But yeah, I had to stop and start it. It was a 10-hour read and it took me months because I stopped and started it so many times because it just felt like it wasn't going anywhere. It was wandering all over the place. I didn't know what her objectives were. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't understand why she was making certain decisions. The potential was incredible, the execution wasn't really there. But I think it's worth trying. I feel like somebody else might read this and love it just from the quality of the writing and the atmosphere of it alone, and maybe they'll get something about the various things that are happening in the story that maybe I just didn't get. So I do recommend giving it a try. And I am going to be looking out for more books by her because, like I said, the writing was superb and maybe another story I'll enjoy better. So, as far as the readathon, this is a great fit for Bayou Haunted House. And two of the prompts in Bayou Haunted House, one of them is a book with a house or an estate in the title. House of Cotton, right? Perfect. And another is ancestral knowledge because she does go to like a woman who practices some kind of hoodoo. I think she's a white woman. No, she's black. She's black, the woman she goes to. So, like, some kind of like hoodoo in order to try to deal with these spirits that she believes are visiting her because it's also not clear if the spirits are visiting her. I actually think this also could fit into, oh, I don't remember. I think it was Laissez Faire Streetcar is one of the locations and one of the prompts for Laissez-Faire Streetcar's unreliable narrator. I do not think Magnolia is completely reliable. I don't know if the hauntings she's experiencing are completely real. So check it out. Check it out. Beautiful writing, story was all over the place to me, but I think somebody else might love it. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to talk about, so we're going up in terms of my order of how I enjoyed the book, is It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Daas. And this is a Caribbean fantasy, horror, romance, noir. It's a very genre blending kind of book because it's kind of a detective murder story. There's a supernatural element. It's also a second chance romance with a young woman named Selena who reconnects with her ex-boyfriend Gabriel as they try to hunt down a serial killer who is killing people on their small Caribbean island. In the beginning of the book, Selena is posing as kind of a fake fortune teller at a shop, but it turns out that she really does have a gift of sight and ability to commune with spirits and some ability to work with the supernatural world, which also was the case for her mother. Her mother was an Obeah woman. I do think they use the term Obeah in this book. So I forgot to look it up. I think the island itself they're on, I'm not sure if it's real. I think the island might be fictional, but it definitely seems to be an island in the Anglo-Caribbean. Okay. So her mother was an Obeah woman. Her father was murdered, and her mother is like on life, has been on life support for like a year. Her father was murdered, and it has something to do with her mother's powers and her mother and the way people in the community feel about her mother's powers. They burned down her house. So, yeah, Selena's having a tough time, right? And she has a new boyfriend, but she connects with her ex-boyfriend in order to try to find this serial killer. And she thinks that by solving this crime, she can clear her mother's name because her mother was always suspected of having something to do with what happened to her father. So, I enjoyed this. I think similar to how I've been feeling about a lot of like debut novels, new releases. It felt like everything was there, but there was just similar to how I felt about some of the mermaid books I talked about in my wrap up earlier this year. It's just like it's there, but it's not. It just feels like there's just a level of depth that's just not quite there. It also had a lot of these tropes I've been noticing in like YA fantasy. I think this book could definitely qualifies as YA. The characters are like late teens, early 20s. It definitely has some of those tropes. Like one of the things I talked about recently was I'm noticing a Cinderella moment. Like there's always a ball or a party or something that it's providing like a ticking clock for the narrative, but also opportunity for the protagonist to wear a beautiful gown, but it also becomes like the place where the sort of climax of the story begins. And so that's just kind of a tropey thing I've been noticing that was definitely here. And I didn't love the romance. It was a second chance romance, and similar to the rest of the book felt like a sequel. I kept looking back at the synopsis of the book to make sure this is the first book and it's not the second in a series because so much of the setup for the book had already happened. Like everything that happened with her mother, and there was like a murder case her mother was involved in and said the guy was innocent. And then whatever the townspeople burned down her house, and then her parents getting attacked and breaking up with the boyfriend. And all of this stuff happens before the book starts. So it just feels like there's so much backstory, and you're kind of trying to keep the backstory straight. And so much of the love story is relying on backstory and the characters already knowing each other and already having fallen in love once. So yeah, to me, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think it's good. I really like the different blend of genres. I really love the whole idea at the beginning around she's like a fake fortune teller, but her power is actually real. And there's these moments of real power even in these fake readings that she's doing. I think that Selena as a character is good. She's a complex character, flawed character, layered character. I was with her, I was rooting for her. And I think the plot is good. I just think it needed to some more meat on it in terms of the execution. So I think it's pretty good. I recommend it. And it fits a few prompts. I think for St. Tremaine's graveyard, one of the locations, it fits three of the prompts. One, a book where a deal is made because there is a deal that is made. I'm not going to say too much about the deal to not have a spoiler, but there is a deal that is made. Two, another prompt is a murder mystery with multiple POVs. So yeah, the book does have some like different POV little segments, and it's definitely a murder mystery. And ancestral knowledge because of the Obia, right? That is passed down from mother to daughter. So that is my third favorite of my recent horror reads. Oh, I'm running out of time. I got to get to my belly dance class because I'm now doing belly dancing and I'm having so much fun with it. So let me try to wrap this up. Okay, my second favorite and the next book I'm going to talk about is Midnight Rooms. And I finally have this one because I didn't read this one on Audible. I got it from the library. Yeah, libraries. I have been spending so much money on books lately. And I just have to remind myself to go to the library. This book is so overdue. Oh my God. I've been waiting to take it back until I talk about it, so I gotta take this back tomorrow because it is so overdue. This is actually why I don't go to the library a lot because I'm terrible at getting my books back on time. But this is one of the best books I have read this year. It's Midnight Rooms by Donyae Coles. I was actually just stumbled on it in the library. I just thought the cover art was so beautiful. And I read the synopsis, and I let me read the synopsis real quick. England, 1840. Orabella Mumthrope spies an unexpected visitor in her uncle's parlor, scruffy in appearance yet claiming to be the scion of a fabulously wealthy family. Elias Bakersby declares a deep desire to make Orabella his wife. The orphan daughter of a white man and a black woman, an outsider with no fortune or connections, Orabella never expected to marry. But her uncle has many debts, and Orabella, curious about his devotion, agrees. The new bride is quickly whisked away to Corrington Hill Manor, The Blakersby family estate, far from everything she knows. Expecting splendor, she is shocked to find decay, skittish servants, and curt elders. Yet there is a darkness deep within the house. Rooms are kept locked or hidden away, and the walls seem to thrum with secrets. So I'll stop there. The synopsis is longer than that. So it's a Gothic novel, and it's a classically Gothic novel, right? So it's a contemporary novel. It just came out 2023 or 2024, but it is set in the 19th century with with a biracial black protagonist who is living in England. And it's just very much that Gothic trope of a young woman without any protection marrying this seemingly wealthy man and going to this old, scary, despondent estate where horrors await her, right? So I would say this is a Gothic novel, it's a horror novel. It seems at first kind of like a romance because things are very spicy with her and her new husband, and she does like fall in love with him. But it is also it very much also has a feeling of like a dark fairy tale. It's just really good. Very genre bending, genre blending, very well written. I do think that it kinda gets repetitive. Arabella wakes up with bruises, clearly the people are drugging her. So I do think that, like, the experiences she's going through, it does kinda start to get repetitive, but I don't know, I couldn't put it down. I wasn't bored. I just wanted to see what is going on here. What is really happening in this house? What are these people's relationships to each other? What are they actually doing to her? I was just along for the ride. It's just like a fever dream. The whole book feels like a fever dream, right? Yeah, I just think it's just so good. It's just so good. So I highly recommend it. One of the definitely the best new release that I have read this year, and my second favorite book that I have read both within this horror month and this year. And it kind of restored my faith in books. It sounds mean, but it's like so many of the books I've been reading have had this, like, I feel like just this shallowness to them, just feeling like it's not fully developed. And there's just a richness. There's a richness to this book and the completion, a feeling of completion to it. Now, I do feel like it left some questions hanging. There were a couple things I wanted answered, and I was still a little bit confused at the end about what exactly the plot was and what was happening, but I don't know, for some reason, it didn't bother me that much, but other readers might feel differently. And so this fits quite a few. I think it fits SheShe's Kitchen historical romance. At least at the beginning. I don't know if you could call it a romance when someone turns out to be terrible, but at least in the beginning, there's elements of a romance, and it certainly gets spicy. What else? I had some other prompts. Oh, I guess that's the main one I said, Smokey historical romance. I also think it kind of fits Bayou Haunted House, even if the haunting doesn't seem always as literal. It's definitely a spooky big house, right? So I feel like it could fit the free space in Bayou's haunted house. And I mean, rooms, house, almost even maybe house in the title. Maybe that's pushing it, but I feel like it could fit free space in Bayou's haunted house. And it definitely fits SheShe's Kitchen spooky historical romance. Okay, let's talk about my favorite read this year. My favorite read of horror month, Blackoween, and that is Tananarive The Reformatory. I also don't have a physical copy because I also read this book on Audible. I ordered the book so I could read a hard copy, but it never came. So I got to see what's going on with my mail. And I did not think this is a 20-hour listen on Audible. And I mean, I sped it up, so I listened to it at, like, 2 times, but I usually do not like to read long books on audiobook because I feel like my attention is gonna wander. Yeah, I read this book in about 2 days. I read it mostly when I was driving. I went to a conference recently, so I read half of it, like, on my drive down there and half on my drive back up. I just finished the last couple of hours today. Tyler Dew is a master. She is just a master of her craft. And when you read someone like Tananarive Due, you remember what how difficult it is like to write this kind of fiction. The Reformatory, I also would call this a Gothic novel because it's not the protagonists and the children in this location are not women and they're not girls. I feel like I do associate the Gothic really, really heavily with like women, like a young woman in a Gothic environment. But it certainly doesn't have to be the case, right? Frankenstein is Gothic, right? And in the one woman in the novel is not a big that big of a character. So you certainly don't need a woman in a creepy castle for it to be Gothic. But I would say this is Gothic. This is a Gothic novel. It took me a while to get to it, even though I read all of Tananarive Dew's books, and this has been out for several months at least. It took me a while to get to it because I thought it was going to be really depressing and sad. And I mean, it is sad. I did cry. Like it's hard because it is related to real stuff, real history, right? Which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Like how you do fantasy and horror when you're dealing with the realities of Black people's histories of like racism and trauma and oppression and racialized violence. So it is about a reform school and it's based on these real reformatories that housed Black and poor white and Native boys. This one is just Black and white boys, but there are similar kinds of institutions that housed Native or Indigenous children where they were abused, killed, murdered, assaulted, starved, right? Just every kind of abuse you can imagine heaped on these children. And these sites and these locations are full of the graves and the remains of these children. Tyler Reeve Dew actually had an uncle named Robert Stevens who died in one of these institutions as a child. And the protagonist in the book is named for him. But she is very careful to say in the author's note that it's not literally him, it's not literally his life, but she was just honoring him by giving the protagonist his name. So, yeah, it's about this young boy, 12-year-old boy, who, in trying to defend his sister from a white boy, gets charged with assault and sent to this reformatory. And the whole book is only 1 week. It's 1 week of him being in this terrible place where just all these terrible things are happening. And there's also the ghosts of all of these boys who have been killed in this place who are haunting it. And Robert has, like a lot of the characters in a lot of these Black horror books, he has the gift of sight. He has the ability to communicate with the ghosts, to see the ghosts. Now, the reformatory is located in Gracetown or outside of Gracetown, which is a recurring location in Tananarive Dew's fiction, similar to, I think Stephen King has a town. I can't think of the name of Stephen King's town, but there's this town which kind of becomes the universe where most of the books happen and circulate around. So Tananarive Dew has done the same with Gracetown. I actually presented about another one of her Gracetown stories at the conference I just went to. And I just love the way she's through all of these years and years of her career and all of these different stories and different characters is building up the lore of Gracetown as this place where the supernatural is really strong. And one of the reasons that is really strong is because of all of the violence that has happened there. So all of the children in Gracetown can see ghosts, can sense ghosts, can feel them, but Robert's power is just especially strong. And his sister also kind of has spiritual power. She doesn't have the same connection to ghosts, but she is able to foresee the future. But she can't control it, right? Of course, she can't control it. So the book is peppered with real people or people who are inspired by real people that both Robert and his sister Gloria come into contact with. It's just an incredible book. So it just chronicles his experience of trying to survive in this reformatory, threatened both by the haunting of these ghosts that he has this kind of complex relationship to, especially one particular ghost, as well as the headmaster who is like a psychopath who is doing terrible things to these children. So he doesn't want this school to close down because it's like his own little private hunting ground. So even though Violence in the book is very much sort of amalgamated into this headmaster. I think Du is also very careful to show how systemic it all is, right? And how one of the things I think the book does so brilliantly and beautifully is to show how even people who think of themselves as good people are pulled into this system. Like there are Black men who work as guards at the reformatory. Even Robert Stevens has an uncle who used to work at the reformatory and never talks about what happened there or the things that he did there. And they're working there because they need a job, they need a paycheck. Like the reformatory is where their printing press is. Like these boys print the books, they grow the corn, like it's prison labor, right? They're providing a lot of the things that the town needs. And the reformatory is employing a lot of people in the town. So it's definitely a microcosm and metaphor for like the contemporary prison industrial complex and juvenile hall and all of that. So there's a lot of really important historical and political messaging in the book, but it is never didactic, it's never preachy, it's never like message over story. I thought this was gonna be really hard to read, and at times it was, but I was just so, like, invested in the story and invested in Robert's attempt to get away and his sister's determination to free her little brother, and just that love, like, that intense love of a sister for her younger sibling, and she'll do anything, she'll stop at nothing, and she tries all these different methods. There's like this metaphor for Black politics happening too. Like, do you work through the system? Do you work outside of the system? What do you do to try to get free? But it is all captured within the story of this family that just loves each other so much. And I think in the debate that we often have around what I call racialized horror or racial horror, where racialized history and violence is a part of the narrative. I think that that's a piece that needs to be there. You've got to have love, right? The love for Black people, the love of the characters for each other. I think you need that so that you can survive the book, right? There's just enough tenderness and love and courage in the book to make me still want to believe in humanity, even seeing the horrible things that these children are experiencing. So, even though it sounds like a hard read, and sometimes it is, Do is just really masterful at keeping the story moving and also sparing us at certain moments from like the worst kind of agony and even sparing the main protagonist of certain things. I think she just did a really good job of creating some balance so that the experience of reading the book isn't so traumatic and painful that you can't enjoy it. And it is extremely thrilling. Like, I don't want to say too I can't talk too much about why it's so thrilling and like exciting because I feel like that spoils too much, but it's it's an amazing book. Okay, so The Reformatory, what does it feel for Blackoween? Bayou Haunted House, ghosts that resides over the house, book with estate in the name, the reformatory is the estate, and haunted house set in the South, right? So it fits all of those. For Saint Tremaine's graveyard, I think it fits a book where a deal is made because there's definitely some deals being made in this. I think it also fits murder with multiple POVs. It does have different POVs, and those include Robert, the sister, even like the crazy, psychotic, sadistic headmaster. We get his POV too, right? So it is a murder with multiple POVs. And then also for Joe's library, which is one of the locations, it fits historical reference and crime fiction because there's a lot of crime in the book. Right? Both the little petty, stupid crimes that aren't even really crimes that the boys get sent to the reformatory for, and the actual crimes that are happening there. And I think that's another really brilliant thematic of the book is making you think about crime, how we construct crime, who gets to say what crime is, who gets to say who a criminal is, what kind of freedoms do certain criminals get as opposed to others. Is it possible if you are a person who has been a Black boy, right? Like the boys in this book, who's been constructed as always already a criminal. Is it even possible to get away from it? So, a lot of the advice that Robert gets when he goes into the reformatory is be good, listen, keep your head down, don't attract no attention. And he tries so hard to do that. He tries really hard, but it's like in this world where you are already constructed as a criminal, there's literally nothing you can do. At some point, the system is going to identify you, right? Meanwhile, you've got these people who are just using this school boys to just act out all of their like violence and desires, and no one calls them a criminal, right? So then it's such an important book. It's such an amazing book. You got to read it. So that is my favorite and my top recommended read of Blackoween. And I'm going to get on out of here and get to Belly Dance. Thank you for listening. You have just listened to the Merwomanist podcast with Mommy Melusine. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, I would love 5 stars, and subscribe for future episodes. You can follow me on Instagram at mommy, that's MAMI, _Melusine, or at Merwomanist Podcast, on LinkedIn at Jalandra Davis, or my website, jalandradavis.com. Wishing you love and laughter and hoping to see you swim this way again.